We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Zayin Amar Aleph Meseches Megillah. This is Megillah Daf 17a. And the previous Amud, the Gemara said that all of the years that Yaakov was at the base Aver, that Yaakov was at the yeshiva of Aver, so since he was learning Torah, so he was not punished for his lack of kibbud avoim. He wasn't punished for the fact that he wasn't able to honor his father because he was away. And now the Gemara explains the calculation, how you know that this is the case. So the Gemara says, Lama nimnu shenosov shel Yishmael. Why is it that we have to enumerate in the Torah how long Yishmael lived, the years of Yishmael? And the answer is Kedei liyaches bohen shenosov shel Yaakov. It's in order to use those years to calculate the years of Yaakov. Tichsiv, because the pasuk says, V'eila shnei chaya Yishmael. It says, what was the life of Yishmael? Ma'as shana u'shloshim shana v'sheva shanim. It says that Yishmael lived for 137 years. So kama koshish Yishmael mi Yitzchak. So the first calculation is, how much older was Yishmael than Yitzchak? And the answer is our Beisar Shenin. Yishmael was 14 years older than Yitzchak. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, V'Avram ben shmonim shana v'shei shanim beledes Hagar as Yishmael Avram. It says that Avram was 86 years old when Yishmael was born. Uchsiv, and the pasuk also says, V'Avraham ben Ma'as shana b'hivalid lo as Yitzchak beno. It says that Avram was 100 years old when Yitzchak was born. So we understand that Yishmael is 14 years older than Yitzchak. Uchsiv, and the pasuk also says, V'Yitzchak ben shishim shana beledes osam. It says that Yitzchak was 60 years old when they gave birth to Yaakov and Esav. So bar kama have Yishmael kedis yolid Yaakov. So now do the math. How old was Yishmael at this time when Yaakov was born? The answer is bar shivim v'arba. He was 74 years old. Again, like we said, he was 14 years older than Yitzchak. So kama paishin mishnei. So now how much time was left that Yishmael was going to live until he was going to die? Right now he's 74, and we already just said that he's going to die when he's 137 years old. So therefore we know the answer is shisanu tlas. We know the answer is 63 years, meaning again, Yishmael has 63 years left to live. Betanya, we learned in a brisa. Yaakov Avinu b'shoshen is borech me'aviv. Yaakov Avinu, at the time that he got the bracha from his father, how old was he? He was ben shishim v'shalosh shana. He was 63 years old at that time. Uvo ba'perek meis Yishmael, and it was at that time that Yishmael died. Yishmael died at that same time. Tichsiv, like the pasuk says, Vayar Esav kiveirach v'gomer, Vayelech Esav el Yishmael. It says that Esav saw that the bracha was given to Yaakov, and then Esav went to Yishmael in order to get married. Vayikach es machalas bas Yishmael. He ended up marrying Machalas, the daughter of Yishmael, achos Nevayos, and it says that she was the sister of Nevayos. So the Gemara says, "Mimashma shenemar bas Yishmael." Once we already know she's the daughter of Yishmael. Eini odeya she achos Nevayos. Isn't it obvious she's the sister of Nevayos? Melami, this comes to teach us shekitshu Yishmael v'meis v'hisiya Nevayos acheha. What it means is that Yishmael was the one. That's the time of the betrothal. Yishmael was still alive. Then he died, and then Nevayos ended up being the one to marry her off. So Shisinu Tlos v'ar Beisar ad Mesyalid Yosef. Now, if he was 63 years old, so then at that time, until the time, 14 years until Yosef is born, Hashivin v'Shiva. So that comes out to 77 years old. 77 years old, in other words, at the time that Yosef is born, Yaakov is 77. Uchsiv, and then the pasuk says, V'Yosef ben Shloshim Shana, that Yosef was 30 years old, ba'amdo lifnei Paro, when he stood in front of Paro. Hameya v'Sheva. So that's now he's 107 years old, Yaakov Avinu. So now Shev the Sava, Vitarti the Kafna, add the 7 years of plenty and the 2 years of famine, Hameya v'Shitzar. That comes out that Yaakov should be 116 years old. Uchsiv, but the pasuk says, Vayomer Paro el Yaakov, the Paro said to Yaakov, Kama yimei shnei chayecha. How old are you? Vayomer Yaakov el Paro, and Yaakov says to Paro, Yimei shnei megurai shloshim u'mas shana. Says that he's what? He's 130 years old. So that's a problem over here. All the math that we've done, Yaakov should only be 116 years old. We've only accounted for that many years. How do we get to 130? So that's what the Gemara asks. The Gemara says, Mi'av v'shitzar havan, shouldn't it be just 116? Elashma mina. So you see from here, Arba esrei shenin, to have a bebeis aver lo chashivlu, that there must be a missing 14 years. Again, you've got 130 versus 116. There's a missing 14 years where he was in the beis aver, the house of Aver, the yeshiva of Aver, and he was learning. And so the Gemara says, Elashma mina, rather you see from here, Arba esrei shenin, to have a bebeis aver, the 14 years that he was in the beis aver, lo chashivlu. Those years that he was learning, it wasn't counted. That accounts for the extra 14 years. And the Gemara says, the Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Yaakov beveis Aver mutman arba esrei shana. Yaakov was in the house of Aver for 14 years. Aver meis la'achar sheyared Yaakov Avinu laharam naharayim shtei shanim. Aver actually died after Yaakov was already by Lavan in Aram Naharayim for 2 years. In other words, Yaakov left 2 years into his stay with Lavan. That's when Aver actually died. Yotza mishamu volo la'aram naharayim. Again, he left the house of Aver. He went to Aram Naharayim. Nimtzu k'she'amar al ha'be'er. Comes out that when he was by the well, ben shivim v'sheva shana. At that time, he was 77 years old. That's referring to the time that he was by the well, that he was by Lavan's house. Now, how do I know that in those 14 years that he was at the house of Aver, how do I know that he was not punished for not doing kibbud avayim? The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, nimtza Yosef shepirish me'aviv esrim u'shtayim shana. It comes out that Yosef was not by his father for 22 years. Keshem shepirish Yaakov Avinu me'aviv, and that's the exact same amount of time that Yaakov was not by his father. To Yaakov, Tlosin V'Shisin Havin. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Yaakov wasn't by his father as much more than 22 years. It was actually 36 years. Ella Arbeisar Dehava B'Veis Aver Lo Chashivlu. Obviously, the 14 years that he was by the house of Aver, that didn't count. So even though it was a total of 36 years that he was away, you have to subtract 14 years. It's only 22 years. And that's why Yosef was away from him for 22 years, like a Midah Keneged Midah. The Gemara says, sof, nevertheless, at the end of the day, the base Lavan, Esrin, Shenin Havin. If we do the calculation, isn't it only 20 years that he was at Lavan's house? He wasn't at Lavan's house for 22 years. If you do the calculation in the Chumash, he was only there 20 years. Elamishum dishtoi be'orcha tartin Shenin. The answer to that is it actually took him 2 years of traveling on the road. The Tanyas were learned in a brayso, Yotza me'aram Naharayim, he left Aram Naharayim, ubalo l'Sukkos, he came to Sukkos, v'yasa sham shmona asar chodesh, and he was there. Again, this was traveling. He was there for 18 months. Shenamar, like the pasuk says, V'Yaakov nasa sukosa, v'yivan lo bayis lo mekneu asa sukos. So that accounts for 18 of the months. Ubebeisel asa shisha chadashim v'hikriv zvachim. In Beisel, that was another 6 months, and he brought karbanos over there. So 18 months plus 6 months, that accounts for the missing 2 years. Hadron alach Megillah Nikris. We will return to you Megillah Nikris. That is the end of the first parak of Meseches Megillah. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And please take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. We will now begin the second parak of Meseches Megillah. And the Mishnah says, Hakorias HaMegillah L'Mafreya. Let's say somebody reads the Megillah out of order. Lo Yotze, you're not Yotze. You have to read the Megillah in order to fulfill the obligation. Kara Al Peh, let's say the person reads it by heart. Kara Targum, let's say the person reads a translation. Or B'chol Lashon, in any language, any kind of translation. Lo Yotze is not going to be Yotze. Aval Korno Lo Azos Belaz. But the Mishnah says you can read it on behalf of somebody who speaks another language. You can read it in their language. V'haloes Shashama Ashuris Yotze. Now somebody who speaks another language, if he hears the Megillah in Hebrew, he is Yotze. Kara Seirugan, let's say the person reads it in intervals, meaning he takes pauses, he takes breaks in the middle. Umisnamneim, or let's say the person dozes off. So Yotze is still Yotze. Even if you read it in those situations, you're going to be Yotze. Hayakosva Dorsho Magia, let's say a person is writing a Megillah, he's darshaning it, he's editing it. Imkiven Libo Yotze. So if while he's doing that, he's also reading the words, and he has Kavana to be Yotze the mitzvah, he's Yotze the mitzvah, assuming this happens on Purim. V'imlav Lo Yotze, if not, then he's not going to be Yotze. Let's say he writes it in these various kinds of inks, al haniyor v'ala diftera, or on different kinds of parchment, paper, or diftera is like a kind of hide that hasn't really been processed. Lo yotze, in all these situations, is not yotze. Ad shetei ksuva ashuris, it has to be written in Hebrew, al hasefer, on the proper kind of parchment, uvidiyo, and with the proper kind of ink, which is called diyo. And Rashi over here says, lilo azos, kol sheino lashon hakodesh nikra laz, anytime it's not in Hebrew, that's called laz, it's a foreign language. Well, the Kaman Parch, the Gemara is going to ask, it's an obvious contradiction in the Mishnah. First you say if you read it in any other language, you're not Yotze. Then you say if you read it for somebody who speaks another language, you are Yotze, if you read it in that other language. So the Gemara will deal with that question. And the Gemara says, Menohani Mili, from where do we know that this is true, that when it comes to the Megillah, you cannot read it out of order? Gemara says, Amar Rava says, the Amar Kra, because the Pasuk says, Kichzavam v'chizmanim, you have to celebrate these days as they are written and in their times. Mazmanam l'mafreya lo, just like time cannot go out of order. Af kisavam l'mafreya lo, so too, that which is written has to be in order. You have to do the mitzvahs in order. Gemara says, what are you talking about? Midi kriya ksiva hacha. It doesn't say anything about reading the Megillah in this pasuk. Asiya ksiva. This is talking about the celebrating of the days. Tichsiv, like the pasuk says, lios osim as shnei hayamim. It says you're going to do these days again. Kichsavam v'chizmanim. So there's nothing here about reading the Megillah. So where's the proof that you have to read it in order? So the Gemara says, Elamehacha, you're right. Rather, the source is from here, from the following pasuk, because the pasuk says, it says these days will be mentioned, and you're going to perform them, you're going to celebrate them. Iskish zechira lasiya. So now the mentioning, meaning the reading of the Megillah, is being compared to the doing of these days, to the celebration of these days. Ma asiya lemafreya lo, just like the asiya cannot be done out of order, so af zechira lemafreya lo. So too when it comes to the zechira, meaning the reading of the Megillah, it cannot be done out of order. The Gemara continues, Tana was taught, v'chein b'halal, v'chein b'kriyas shema u'v'tfila. The same is true by halal, cannot be out of order. The same is true by kriyas shema, cannot be out of order. And the same is true by tefillah, meaning Shemona Esrei, that also cannot be out of order. Halal, minolan, how do you know that's true by halal? Rabba Amar Dechsiv mi mizrach shemesh ad mevo. It says in the halal, from when the sun rises until it sets. Obviously that can't be out of order. So too the recitation of the halal cannot be out of order. Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef says, Zeh hayom asa Hashem. It says this is the day that Hashem made. Again, it means keseder hayom, according to the order of the day. Not going to change the hours of the day. So too over here, you can't read it out of order. Rav Avya Amar, Rav Avya says a different source. It says Yehi Shem Hashem Mevorach. It says in the halal Yehi. So the word Yehi means kehavyaso, as it is written. You have to do it in the proper order. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, v'yitema Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar, and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and some people say Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, Mehacha, from here, from the following pasuk, Me'atov yad olam, from now until forever. Again, that's an idea of time. Just like time cannot go out of order, so too the recitation of halal must be in order. The Gemara continues, Kriya Shema. How do you know Kriya Shema has to be said in order? The Tanya, as we learned in the Brisa, Kriya Shema kechsava divrei Rebbe. So he says the Kriya Shema has to be the way it's written. That means to say you have to read it in Hebrew. No other languages according to Rebbe. The Chachamim say it can be read in any language. The Gemara says, my time of the Rebbe. Now what's the reason of Rebbe that it has to be in Hebrew? Because Amar Krab, because the pasuk says, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video, on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis.